Right now, as you're watching this, your brain is getting smaller. That's not a metaphor, and it's not meant to scare you. It's a measured, documented biological fact. After the age of 50, the human brain loses volume every single year, and the region that shrinks the fastest is the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory, for learning, for holding on to the names and faces and details that make your life feel like yours. Most people assume that's just what aging does, and there's nothing you can do about it. The brain you have is the brain you're stuck with, and it only goes in one direction from here. But that assumption is wrong, and the research that proves it wrong is what this entire video is about. Your brain is still making new cells right now, today. Even at 65, even at 75, there is a small population of stem cells living in your hippocampus whose entire purpose is to produce fresh neurons throughout your entire life. Scientists used to believe that it wasn't possible that the adult brain couldn't generate new cells, but that idea has been overturned by decades of published evidence. The system still works. The problem is that after 50, it slows down considerably. The raw materials become scarce, the chemical signals that tell those stem cells to activate get weaker, and the environment inside the brain becomes more hostile to the survival of newly formed cells. So the machinery is still there. It just isn't running the way it used to. And what I want to show you today is that 3 completely ordinary nuts, things you've probably walked past 1,000 times at the grocery store, have been shown in published peer-reviewed research to directly address each of those 3 problems, not in the same way, not as 3 versions of the same general benefit. Each one fixes a different specific bottleneck in the process of growing and keeping new brain cells. One provides the raw building material from which your neurons are made. One delivers the exact molecule that researchers identified as the activation signal for dormant brain stem cells, and one protects newly formed neurons from the hostile environment that would otherwise destroy them before they ever become functional. I want to walk you through each one step by step so you understand not just what to eat, but exactly why it works and how much you actually need. Let's start with the building material, because nothing gets built without it. If you crack open a walnut and look at what's inside, you'll notice something that people have pointed out for centuries. It looks like a miniature brain, 2 wrinkled hemispheres sitting inside a hard shell, folded and ridged just like the organ it resembles. And what's remarkable is that the resemblance isn't just cosmetic, because walnuts contain something your brain desperately needs and can't make on its own. Walnuts are the only common nut that contains a significant amount of a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. Most other nuts are rich in omega-6 fats, which are fine but not what your brain is hungry for. Walnuts give you omega-3, and that distinction makes all the difference. A single ounce, about 7 walnut halves, a small handful, delivers roughly 2.5 grams of ALA. That one handful covers almost your entire daily omega-3 requirement. Now, why does your brain care about omega-3 so much? Because your brain is almost 60% fat by dry weight, and the membrane that wraps around every single neuron, the thin barrier that allows brain cells to send and receive signals from each other, is built from fatty acids. When those membranes are rich in omega-3, signals pass between neurons quickly and cleanly. When those membranes are depleted, communication slows down. Thinking gets foggier, memory becomes less reliable. And it's not because something broke, it's because the supply ran low. Think of it like a road that's still perfectly fine, but nobody's been maintaining it, so the traffic moves slower and slower until you forget the road was ever fast in the first place. But providing building material isn't even the most interesting thing walnuts do. Researchers at the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center at Tufts University studied what happens when walnuts are added to the diet consistently over time, and what they found goes well beyond basic nutrition. In aging animal models, walnut-enriched diets didn't just protect existing brain cells from decline. They actively increased neurogenesis, the actual production of brand new neurons in the hippocampus. The researchers traced this effect to the polyphenolic compounds concentrated in the walnut, particularly in that thin, slightly bitter, papery skin that covers the nut meat. Those polyphenols reduce oxidative stress in brain tissue, lower inflammation, and improve the signaling between existing neurons, all while stimulating the creation of new ones. So from one food, you're getting 3 things simultaneously: protection of old cells, better communication between current cells, and the construction of new cells. And 90% of those polyphenols live in the skin. If you buy blanched walnuts or peel the skin off because of the slight bitterness, you're throwing away the most valuable part. Eat the skin. That bitterness is the benefit. A small handful a day, 7 walnut halves, less than $1, and your brain gets its primary construction material and its cleanup crew in a single snack. So now your brain has the building blocks it needs. But building blocks alone don't build anything. You also need the signal that tells your brain stem cells to wake up and start dividing. Without that signal, The stem cells sit dormant. The materials are there. The workers are asleep. For years, scientists have known that exercise is the most powerful trigger for new brain cell growth. That was established, replicated, and accepted. What nobody could explain was how. What was the actual molecule that carried the message from your exercising body to the stem cells sitting inside your hippocampus? What was the biological mechanism? In 2022, a research team at the University of Queensland in Australia published a landmark study in cell metabolism that answered that question. And the answer surprised everyone. They compared blood proteins in mice that exercised against mice that didn't, looking for what changed. They found that exercising mice had significantly elevated levels of a selenium transport protein, a molecule whose job is to carry the trace mineral selenium through the bloodstream and deliver it to the brain. When that selenium reached the hippocampus, it activated dormant neural stem cells, prompting them to begin producing new neurons. When the researchers knocked out the selenium transport pathway genetically, exercise stopped producing brain benefits entirely. The mice ran the same distance, burned the same calories, but their brains showed no increase in new cell production. The selenium was the mechanism. Exercise was just the delivery system. So then they tested the obvious next question. What if you skip the exercise entirely and just give the selenium directly? They supplemented the diets of aging mice with selenium and measured the effects. New neuron production in the hippocampus doubled. Learning and memory deficits that had developed with age reversed. Old mice started performing like younger ones on cognitive tests. The researchers specifically noted that selenium supplementation mimicked the neurogenic effects of exercise. Now sit with that for a moment. If you're a senior who can't exercise the way you used to, bad knees, a hip that's been replaced, chronic fatigue, a heart condition that limits how hard you can push, the single most proven method for growing new brain cells has always been physical exercise, and for millions of older adults, that option feels limited or closed entirely. This study didn't just find an interesting nutrient, it identified the exact molecule that makes exercise work for the brain and showed that delivering it through food produces the same result. And that molecule is selenium. And the richest food source of selenium on the planet is the Brazil nut. Not by a small margin, by an enormous one. A single Brazil nut contains roughly 70 to 90 micrograms of selenium. The recommended daily intake is 55 micrograms. You exceed your entire daily requirement with one nut. A clinical trial at the University of Sao Paulo took this out of the animal lab and into real human patients. They recruited older adults who had been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, gave them one Brazil nut per day for 6 months, and measured what happened. By the end of the study, selenium deficiency had been eliminated in the entire treatment group, antioxidant defenses in the blood improved measurably, and cognitive performance improved on tests of verbal fluency and constructional reasoning, one nut, 6 months, measurable cognitive improvement in people who were already experiencing decline. But I need to tell you something important here because this is a nutrient where the dose genuinely matters. Selenium is one of those rare cases where more is absolutely not better. Your body needs a tiny amount and too much becomes toxic. 1 or 2 Brazil nuts a day is the sweet spot. 4 or 5 every day over time can push you past safe levels and start causing problems, including hair loss, fatigue, and nerve damage. This is the one food on this list where you need to respect the limit. 1 a day is perfect. 2 is fine. Don't go beyond that. The power of this nut is that you need so little of it to get the full benefit. So now your brain has the building material from the walnuts and the activation signal from the Brazil nut. But there's a third problem standing in the way, and unless you solve it, the first 2 won't deliver their full effect. It's the problem nobody thinks about until it's too late, and it has to do with what happens to new brain cells after they're created. Your brain uses roughly 20% of all the oxygen your body takes in, even though it only makes up about 2% of your body weight. That enormous oxygen consumption is necessary because thinking is metabolically expensive, but it has a side effect. All that oxygen processing generates free radicals, unstable molecules that damage cell membranes, scramble DNA, and destroy neurons. This is called oxidative stress, and it is one of the primary drivers of age-related cognitive decline. When you're young, your body's antioxidant defenses keep up with the damage. After 50, the balance tips. The damage starts accumulating faster than the repair system can fix it. And here's the part that connects directly to everything we've been talking about. The new neurons your brain is trying to produce are the most vulnerable cells in the entire system. Freshly formed brain cells are more fragile than established ones. They haven't built up the protective infrastructure that mature neurons have. So when they're born into an environment that's saturated with oxidative damage, many of them die before they ever mature into functional working neurons. You're growing new cells, but losing them almost immediately. It's like planting seeds in poison soil. This is where pecans become essential because pecans have the highest antioxidant capacity of any common tree nut, and it's not close. They rank number one among nuts for oxygen radical absorbance, which is the standard measure of how effectively a food neutralizes free radicals. And the compound doing most of that work is called ellagic acid, a polyphenol that has shown direct neuroprotective effects in published research, specifically the ability to reduce amyloid plaque formation, lower neuroinflammation, and protect brain cells from oxidative death. But what makes ellagic acid truly unusual is something that most dietary antioxidants cannot do. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. Your brain is surrounded by a tightly sealed filtering system that controls what gets in and what stays out. Most of the antioxidants you eat in your diet never make it past that barrier. They do their work elsewhere in the body, but the brain is off limits. Ellagic acid is one of the compounds that gets through. It enters your brain tissue directly and goes to work at the exact site where the oxidative damage is happening and where your new neurons need protection the most. And there's a second wave of benefit that comes later. When you eat pecans, your gut bacteria break down the ellagic acid into compounds called urolithins, which have their own documented anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective effects. So you get an immediate hit of protection when the ellagic acid crosses into the brain, and then a second sustained wave hours later as your microbiome processes what's left. 2 layers of defense from the same food. A 1-ounce serving of pecans, about 19 halves, delivers a powerful dose of ellagic acid alongside vitamin E, zinc, and manganese, all of which support neural communication and cell maintenance, about 40 cents at any grocery store. And the role they play in this system is the one that ties everything together because the pecans don't build new brain cells and they don't activate stem cells. What they do is keep the new cells alive long enough to become functional working neurons. Without that protection, the building material and the activation signal are doing half the job. And that's what makes this combination genuinely remarkable. These aren't 3 nuts that all do the same thing in slightly different ways. They address 3 entirely different failure points in the same biological process. And when you combine them, you're clearing the road from 3 directions at once. The walnut provides omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols that build neuron membranes, reduce brain inflammation, and stimulate the production of new cells. That's the construction crew and the raw materials. The Brazil nut delivers selenium, the specific trace mineral that a 2022 study published in Cell Metabolism identified as the molecular key that unlocks dormant neural stem cells in the hippocampus and triggers them to divide. That's the foreman telling the crew to start working, and the pecan floods the brain with ellagic acid and antioxidants that cross the blood-brain barrier and shield newly formed neurons from the oxidative stress that would otherwise kill them before they mature. That's the security team protecting what's being built. Construction, activation, protection, 3 bottlenecks, 3 solutions, 3 foods you can hold in one hand. You don't need them all at once. Walnuts in the morning with breakfast, a Brazil nut after lunch, pecans in the afternoon, or just toss a small mix into a bag and keep it on your counter. The combined cost is probably under $1 a day, definitely under $2. I want to end with something direct because I think honesty is more important than keeping you excited. This is not a cure for Alzheimer's disease. It is not a substitute for medication your doctor has prescribed. It is not going to reverse 20 years of cognitive decline with a handful of mixed nuts. If someone tells you it will, they're selling you something. But what the published research says more clearly with every passing year is that your brain has not stopped building. The stem cells in your hippocampus are still present. The pathways for neurogenesis still function. What's been missing are the right inputs, the right raw materials, the right activation signals, and an environment safe enough for new cells to survive in. And what's been getting in the way is a brain starved of omega-3, depleted of selenium, and overwhelmed by oxidative stress that has been accumulating unchecked for years. Every nut on this list addresses one of those problems directly. Together, they address all of them. For less than the cost of your morning coffee, with food you can buy at any grocery store in the country. Backed by research published in peer-reviewed journals, not health blogs, and not supplement advertisements, your brain is still building. It's been building this whole time. It just needs you to give it something to build with. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.